Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Thursday, 6th of September 2018. It's an absolutely glorious early September morning down here in the southwest of England. And tonight I shall be back in the studio in Plymouth, and we'll be doing an episode of both Humanity versus Insanity, more of which later, and of Fracking Nightmare. Now, yesterday I was waxing lyrical over, what an amazing 4-0 result the anti-fracking community had had the previous day. Well, yesterday was really a day that truly marked the desperation of the corporatocracy. Now, let's understand and be very, very clear that corporatism is not capitalism. Corporatism is solely about greed. Capitalism is about the creation of wealth and the distribution of wealth. And a true capitalist recognizes the importance of the role of capitalism and the creation of wealth and the creation of employment in society. It's not about greed. Corporatism is solely about greed, and more greed, where the wealth is filtered into a very small number of pockets. Well, actually, it's normally offshore bank accounts, of course. And despite the rhetoric from the establishment, of course, they are actually party to it. So it's a case of, watch my lips, but don't actually watch going on behind my back. So the title of today's broadcast is The Desperation of the Corporatocracy. And this is epitomized by the injunction that IGAS managed to blag in the High Court in London earlier in the week. Now, of course, this is an injunction that was effectively achieved in secret. So there was no forward notification. There was no posting of intent to seek an injunction. They simply rocked up at the High Court and said, basically, we need this injunction. And that was on the Friday. They submitted the documents, and on the Monday, it was stamped without any due process. And, the judge hearing this case was the same judge that heard the INEOS case. So, I would actually like to take this opportunity to invite Justice Morgan to recuse himself from any further participation in this process, because the IGAS injunction is effectively little more than a cut and paste of the INEOS injunction, which of course was heard by Justice Morgan. And frankly, the injunction that has been stamped is little more than a cut and paste from that. So consequently, I have little doubt that, we can go through 1, 2, 3 days of hearings, and then the ruling will simply be a cut and paste of the INEOS ruling. And of course, Justice Morgan will probably go through the process. Well, I'm going to defer for a few days so that I can consider my position. But the reality is that the ruling is effectively already written, and we just go through the charade in the courts. So at the very least, let's pretend that justice is being seen to be done, and that those who wish to oppose this injunction do at least get the pretense of getting a fair hearing under Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights, and in which case then Justice Morgan should actually do the right thing and step down from any further participation. We'll have to see whether that occurs, or whether that has to be actually raised at the hearing, which is scheduled for Tuesday, the 2nd of October. Now, this IGAS injunction, achieved in secret, covers Ellesmere Port, Tinker Lane, and Missing Springs. And to respond to a question I was asked yesterday, no, the injunction does not and cannot have any direct impact on the protection camps that are at Missing Springs, and Tinker Lane. but the document does provide the exclusion zones. So I'll say no more about that, but anyone who's really interested should take a very careful look at the documentation that is posted on the IGAS website and elsewhere, and take a look at the limitations, because as is always the case, creativity obviously has an opportunity to come into play. Now, one of the elements of this injunction was that included in the documentation, which is all against persons unknown. So, there's no named defendants, but there's a whole list of anti-fracking groups and indeed individuals, including, and it says that these are organisations and individuals believed to be opposing fracking, including yours truly. I'm not sure what their first clue was, but, that's a lazy document, because basically it doesn't even scratch the surface. So if you're trying to convince the courts that that is the sum total of opposition to fracking, then, maybe we take that opportunity to rectify that in the courts on Tuesday, 2nd of October. So there's a date for your diary, and I think the first order of the day will be to ensure that Justice Morgan is made aware of the concerns about a fair hearing. Now, but let's bear in mind that the hearing is in the London Civil Courts in Fetter Lane, in the heart of the city. And, the heart of the city is the heart of the corporatocracy. And the likelihood of really getting a fair hearing in London is basically slim to none, because, as has been seen time and time and time again, in the civil courts, they simply ride roughshod over parliamentary law, and commerce has legal precedent over the health and well-being of the population of the country. And the judiciary hide behind the Court of Appeal ruling, the City of London versus Samid of 2012, where the Court of Appeal judges said that basically any judge hearing an application for an injunction should not take into account the reason for the opposition. Well, that's perhaps all well and good when you're talking about a protest against a generic financial system, i.e. fractional reserve banking. But here, the specifics are that those communities that are being targeted, those communities that have the misfortune to live in the sacrifice zone, are effectively having a loaded gun held to their head by the corporations and supported by the civil courts. So yet another opportunity to get the message across that the increasing opposition to this industry is extremely well-founded and indeed, without any shadow of doubt, justified. So that's the 2nd of October. The schedule is this, that anyone who wishes to challenge the injunction in the court is invited to let IGAS's legal representatives know by next Friday. That's Friday the 14th of September. And supporting documentation has to then be submitted by, I believe it might as well be the following Friday, because it's the 22nd. So effectively 4 p.m, 5 p.m. on the afternoon of Friday, 21st of September. And ready for the hearing on the 2nd of October. So it looks like my autumn is going to be one that is very much based in the courtroom. Because first of all, we have that IGAS injunction hearing. And then literally a week later, I shall be in Gateshead supporting Mark Steele as he resists the injunction that has been placed upon him by the courts following the application by Gateshead Metropolitan Borough Council to prevent Mark Steele from sharing the information that he is accumulating on the dangers of LED street lighting and 5G. And of course, the corporatocracy is pumping out the need for the next generation of mobile phone systems, 5G. But as Mark and others have demonstrated, this is a military technology that is linked very much with the rise in PTSD and in suicides amongst ex-service personnel, because it's a battlefield interrogation technology that has not been tried on the civilian population, but where it has been tested, such as Bristol University, there has been a marked increase in the number of student suicides. So that hearing is in Newcastle Crown Court, and that is on October the 11th. Then a little over a week or so later, on October 23rd, we'll be in Gateshead Law Courts as Mark defends himself against the allegation of a public order offence following his confrontation with two councillors who actually claim that they felt that their lives were in danger, and as the video evidence will show, that's a total crock. But anyway, we'll see what happens in the courts. And then on November the 5th, I will be in Southwark Crown Court supporting David Noakes. And David Noakes is in fact my guest on Humanity versus Insanity tonight. Now, David Noakes has been a guest before, way back in early 2015. I think it was episode number 37. And this was shortly after the MHRA, the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Authority, had arbitrarily and without any sanction from the courts, had raided his premises where he was producing GC-MAF, which is a proven effective cancer treatment. And David had his bank accounts frozen, all the employees were effectively thrown out of the premises, all of the plant and equipment was seized, and finally the MHRA are taking David and his partner to court under the Cancer Act of 1939, which makes it illegal for anyone, and in particular any medical professional, to claim that there is any alternative treatment to cancer except chemo and radiotherapy. Well, of course, this was challenged recently with the recent ruling by Saeed Javid that cannabis actually has been established as an effective treatment against not just cancers, but some other conditions as well. And it seems that Saeed Javid could make that decision unilaterally without necessarily going through the alleged due process. And I'm sure the MHRA are watching this very, very closely. Now, the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Authority is effectively a protection organisation for big pharma. So the reason that they shut David down was because obviously the results were coming in. A number of scientific papers were written following the proven beneficial results achieved by using GC-MAF, of course, as is always the case, in conjunction with an appropriately modified diet. So this will be the subject of my discussion with David Noakes this evening, and he will be explaining, the persecution that he has been put under by the MHRA, okay, without any due process. So the MHRA operating with totally unilaterally to protect big pharma. So this is the desperation of the corporatocracy. The only way in which they can push through the unconventional hydrocarbon agenda is by getting high court injunctions. And every time they do this, of course, more and more people actually start to say, well, hang on a second, there's something not quite right here. And more people start to actually understand why there is a growing, in fact, it's the fastest growing social movement this country has ever seen. It goes right across the political and social spectrum. And, now we're seeing that community start to take an interest in 5G. because, you know, fracking impacts potentially around about 30% of the country of England. But 5G, if it is rolled out on its proposed schedule of 2020, it's going to impact on everyone. And as is always the case, it will be your children, the elderly, and the vulnerable who are affected first. So if I thought that I was going to have a relaxing autumn, I guess I need to think again. Somebody said to me recently, so when are you thinking of retiring, Ian? And I said, well, obviously not anytime soon, because until such time as we start to see a return to a society where everybody is recognized as having the right to life and the rights as described within or proscribed within the European Convention on Human Rights, then I guess that I, and hopefully an increasing number of others, will be on the case. So thanks for joining me this morning, and I look forward to seeing you this evening on Humanity versus Insanity at 7:30 p.m. and Fracking Nightmare at 9 p.m. And you can watch them live either on the same Facebook page that this is going out from right now, or on ukcolumn.org/live. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you again tomorrow. Well, good morning.